The Pioneer Woman Museum is proud to present I See No Boundaries. This is a program dedicated to the enduring spirit of women who saw no boundaries. Sponsored by the Pioneer Woman Museum and the Daughters of the American Revolution. And now your host, Valerie Hays, with I See No Boundaries.
Welcome today. My name is Valerie Hays, and this is She Sees No Boundaries, the show that explores the lives of women who have accomplished things in spite of the obstacles placed in their path. She Sees No Boundaries is brought to you by the Pioneer Woman Museum of the Oklahoma Historical Society and the Ponca City chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Our guest today is Eleanor Hays, who has been had a successful career in teaching, a longtime resident in Ponca City. She's been named as one of the outstanding elementary teachers of America and received the Lifetime Service Award from the Tonkawa Chamber of Commerce. Eleanor, thank you so much for joining us here today.
You're quite welcome.
We would like to take some time, if you don't mind today, and ask you a few questions about your life as a teacher and some of the things that you remember about that. How did you decide that you wanted to make a career in teaching?
Valerie, I think I always wanted to be a teacher. My mother was a teacher. My aunt was a teacher. And as I grew up, I played school a lot. So when I finished high school at Tonkawa in 1929, I enrolled at the junior college right there in Tonkawa. And at that time, they were offering an elementary life certificate with 60 hours. So I enrolled in that and pursued that course and received my life certificate. Then when I was ready to go on for my last 2 years, my family sent me to Ohio Wesleyan University, and I took an A.B. degree in sociology. Now when you come out of college with a sociology degree, at that time, there were not your career would lie in a large city, doing casework in a settlement house or something of the sort. Well, being from a small town, the city did not appeal to me like Akron, Cleveland, Cincinnati. So I decided to come back home and try to find a job as teaching. Now this was not as easy as you might think. Remember, I came out of college in 1933, right in the midst of the Depression. Lots of people were out of work. For every teaching job, there were probably 15 people applying because there were that many people without work. So just here it was the middle of August that I was home, no job. A friend of mine told me about a friend of hers that had planned to teach, but she got married. Well, when you got married and you had a contract, you didn't have a contract any longer because it was, I can't say it was a custom, what would you say? No, you didn't have two wage earners in the same family.
Oh, I see.
No, not two. So if you married, you presumed your husband had a job. So my father took me over to this farmer's house north of Nardin, Oklahoma on a Sunday morning. And I tell them that their teacher that they had hired had married. They didn't know it. But luckily for me, I got the job. They hired me 2 weeks before. That was the middle of August, and school started at the first Tuesday after Labor Day. So that's how quickly how close I was running to not having a job.
So you were fresh out of college. How old were you at this time?
21.
21, and you found a teaching job right in the nick of time.
Right in the nick of time.
Now, didn't you meet someone who would be important in your life while you were in college?
Oh, yes. Yes, probably one of the reasons I wanted to come back to Tonkawa was that I had already met my husband-to-be. We met when we were freshmen in high school, or freshmen in college. And then if you were to talk to him, he would say, that's the reason I went back to Ohio to school. My folks thought they might delay things a little if I spent 2 years back there in college. And he, in the meantime, had finished his 2 years at Tonkawa and had gone to the University of Oklahoma.
Okay, so when you came back to Tonkawa to teach, you were still single?
Oh, yes.
And that was required in those days of teachers, that they be single?
Yes. And there were lots of marriages kept secret, if they could, among teachers, because if one had a job, the other one flat had to give up their contract.
You said that you were you'd always known that you wanted to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
This was something that your family encouraged?
Yes, yes, very much.
And your mother was a teacher,
Yes,
wasn't she?
yes.
Folks, we're talking today with Eleanor Hays, and we'll be back in just a moment.
The Pioneer Woman Museum is dedicated to Oklahoma's pioneering women, those women who saw no boundaries to what they could accomplish. See the story of aviation pioneer Jerry Cobb, the inaugural gowns of the First Ladies of Oklahoma, saddles, spinning wheels, stoves, organs, quilts, and many other unique items. Exceptional stories are told at the Pioneer Woman Museum, Tuesday through Saturday, 9 to 5, and Sunday, 1 to 5. Pioneer Woman Museum is located at US 77 and Lake Road. Come visit the Pioneer Woman Museum today.
Welcome back. We're talking today with Eleanor Hays of Tonkawa, a longtime teacher. Eleanor, we've been talking about how you got into teaching, and you finished college and came back to Tonkawa and managed to get a job even in the midst of the Depression. And so here you were, 21 years old and fresh out of school and getting ready to teach in a rural school.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about your first teaching job.
Well, I might say, in defense of rural school teaching, that was the place to be during the Depression. I never got a warrant while I was teaching in the rural schools that wasn't marked insufficient funds.
Now, what do you mean by warrant?
That was your check, your paycheck.
Your paycheck?
Your paycheck that your clerk of your school board would bring to you at the end of the month. But there's always insufficient funds written on it. That meant there wasn't enough money in Newkirk to cover the check from this district. Well, I could take that check to my bank in Tonkawa. Did I tell you that my first school was $60 a month?
$60 a month.
They would give me $60. Now, if I had been financially able, I could have held that warrant because it began to draw interest from the time it was issued. But I couldn't. But I could take it to the bank. They would give me my money. They held the thing and collected the interest. That's where they made their money. Now, some banks, I understood, discounted the warrant before they paid you, so you wouldn't get your full $60. But the Bank of Commerce there in Tonkawa gave me the full $60. All right. My first school was the first district north of Narden, Oklahoma. There was a rural school every 3 miles. And it was a beautiful community to teach in. I had, probably 20 pupils. They had a sort of a standing rule that the teacher could not board and room in a family where there were children in school, lest the teacher help the children with their homework. So I had to find a place to live that had no children. 1.5 miles from school was the only people that qualified. So I lived, and I didn't have a car. I walked. I don't so much remember walking in the morning. I think the man where I stayed, he probably might have taken me. But I do remember walking home in the evening after a long day's work. A mile and a half is a long ways to walk. And had to pay $20 a month out of my $60 for room and board. So there was a family that lived right practically across the road from the schoolhouse, 100 yards maybe. And I was talking to her, and she says, I would keep you for $10 a month. She says, and because she had 3 children in school. But she said, cooking for my family, one more plate on the table would not make that much difference. So we prevailed upon the school board, and they let me move in across the road from the schoolhouse. I don't remember, probably a couple of months that I walked to my mile and a half. And then from then on, I just was a mile across the street, or across the road.
Reduced your travel time
Yes,
considerably.
it did, and put $10 more in my purse. Now, interesting thing about my $60 a month, 1932, Franklin Roosevelt instituted income tax. So I had to make out an income tax for $480. That was my earnings for the year.
You paid that.
No, I didn't. I don't think they taxed me, but at least I had to go through the formalities of an income tax.
Now, on those 20 children that were in your first class that year, now, were these all the same grade or
Oh,
different grades?
no, all 8 grades.
How did you deal with 8 grades all together in a day's time?
It wasn't easy, but we didn't know any better. You gave... Two of my things that I never could understand was how my first graders ever learned to read and how my fourth graders ever learned to do long division. But they did. My first graders, I was with them 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes after the first recess, 10:30, 15 minutes after dinner, and 15 minutes after the last recess. A total of 1 hour a day. Now that's when you would have them around you and they would recite to you. All right, then you gave 10 minutes for spelling here, and well, sometimes you were missing a grade. I can't remember. There was one school I taught had 32 children in all 8 grades. Now that took some doing. But in this first school, I think I was missing maybe there were no 4th graders, or maybe there were no 5th graders. Well, that eased the tension a little bit as far as your schedule, because you gave 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there, and bless their hearts, they learn. A lot of it comes from absorption. You didn't have any discipline problems. You didn't have anybody running around the classroom. When they were finished with what they did, they sat quietly in their seats. Some of them read, some of them listened. You couldn't, to find seat work for all of those people to do would have been a real undertaking. You tried, but it was all next to impossible to find something for every child to do while everybody else was busy.
So they learned from listening to the other students.
They learned from listening, yes.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that. We're talking today with Eleanor Hays, and we'll be back in just a moment.
The Pioneer Woman Museum is dedicated to Oklahoma's pioneering women, those women who saw no boundaries to what they could accomplish. See the story of aviation pioneer Jerry Cobb, the inaugural gowns of the First Ladies of Oklahoma, saddles, spinning wheels, stoves, organs, quilts, and many other unique items. Exceptional stories are told at the Pioneer Woman Museum, Tuesday through Saturday, 9 to 5, and Sunday, 1 to 5. Pioneer Woman Museum is located at US 77 and Lake Road. Come visit the Pioneer Woman Museum today.
Welcome back. We're talking today with Eleanor Hays of Tonkawa, longtime teacher. And Eleanor, we've been discussing what it was like for you beginning as a teacher in the rural schools in the 1930s, in the middle of the Depression. You had sometimes 7 or 8 grades all together, and you were talking about how you allotted time throughout the day for all these grades, but it wasn't just teaching. You had other responsibilities as well. What was it like in the wintertime? How did you heat the school building and things like that?
That's interesting. You must remember the teacher. Our building had no telephone. Probably the closest person to live was when I boarded with a lady across the road. Other times you were within a half mile of your other farmhouse. You were the janitor, you were the doctor, you were the nurse, you were the disciplinarian. You were a one-person operation. I mean, you were responsible for these little kids. And now you asked me another question there about, in the wintertime, what we did. In the very first school that I taught, we had natural gas. And that was a boon because especially when I was at across the street, when I got there, when my dad brought me back on Sunday evening, I could go across and light the furnace, the big stove, turn it very low, and by the time I'd get there the next morning, the chill would be off the room, and then I could turn it up. Now, when I went east of Blackwell and taught for 2 years, that was another story. They burned coal, and Monday morning was a real chore. You had to get rid of the ashes that had accumulated. Then you had to build a fire from scratch, something I had never done in my life, but I learned to do it. Now, on Monday evening, Tuesday evening, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, you would get a big chunk of coal and put it on the coals in the fire, turn all the dampers down, and that would keep the chill off on the weekdays, but Monday morning it was just as cold as it could be, and it would take till first recess for the room. Sometimes the children wore their coats until first recess because it was that cold in the room.
How did you deal with medical emergencies that would come up?
You took care of them. I think I told you about the little girl. This was at the district that I taught southwest of Tonkawa, when she had the mishap of being in a fire, children playing in the sand pile, and she got this right in her face.
A face full of sand.
Face full of sand. Now, if you have never seen the human eye cleanse itself, it is an experience. The eye begins to secrete mucus, gobs of it. You just pull it out until it quits, and then you know that is, and you just, who else would do it?
No telephone, so
no telephone. You dealt with it. And then there was one time a little boy fell off the slippery slide, going up the slippery slide, and fell and broke his collarbone.
Oh, goodness.
Well, by the time, I don't remember exactly how I handled that, but I know that when the father came to school, he was in a rage. He was going to take down every stick of playground equipment that was on the playground. They were nothing but kid killers, he said, because his boy had fallen off. And if I'd have been, and a little bit critical of me because I wasn't standing right there to catch him, when he went, a lot of kids on the playground. And if I'd been standing right there, he probably would have still fallen the wrong way and broken his collarbone. And I tried to tell him, I said, you take these children to Ladies' Aid Society when your wife goes, and you turn them loose on the farm and the kids play while the mothers are in Ladies' Aid. And you don't think anything if they fall out of the haymow or something like that. But he was going to dismantle all the playground equipment. So we passed that by. But you are responsible. You have to take care of it. And then, as I've often said about a teacher, you have to improvise a lot.
Well, teaching has never been a task for the faint-hearted, but it sounds like it was. You needed a particularly strong constitution
you have to, have
teach in a country
do,
school.
Indeed.
Looking back on your career, from your perspective now and having taught in the schools that people are more familiar with now, one grade at a time, do you regret doing these things?
Oh, no, no,
Would you do things differently now?
no. I
No?
just have no regrets. Have no regrets. Wish I had a car, but I was very dependent on my father's coming by, or a teacher maybe that taught beyond you would come by and pick you up. But I would have loved to have had the freedom of having my own car. That's the only thing.
We're talking today with Eleanor Hays, and we'll be back in just a moment.
The Pioneer Woman Museum is dedicated to Oklahoma's pioneering women, those women who saw no boundaries to what they could accomplish. See the story of aviation pioneer Jerry Cobb, the inaugural gowns of the First Ladies of Oklahoma, saddles, spinning wheels, stoves, organs, quilts, and many other unique items. Exceptional stories are told at the Pioneer Woman Museum, Tuesday through Saturday, 9 to 5, and Sunday, 1 to 5. Pioneer Woman Museum is located at US 77 and Lake Road. Come visit the Pioneer Woman Museum today.
Welcome back. We're talking today with Eleanor Hays, career teacher, longtime resident of Tonkawa. And Eleanor, you spent your early years of teaching in the Kay County area, in the rural schools in this area. And you've been telling us a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced as a teacher. And through your career, you've seen a lot of changes in the way that schools are operated. Are there some that stand out particularly in your mind? You were talking about the lunches that children brought originally, and when hot lunches were instituted in schools.
Yes, back in 1933, the PTA, Parent Teachers Association, was just blossoming. And I really don't know when they started, but they were beginning to organize, and every school had a PTA. And one of their programs was hot lunches. And what do you do for a hot lunch in a country school? Well, fortunately for me, that in that first school, north of Narden, where I had the gas, they also had a 2-burner hot plate. So, with my father's help, they used to have a lard bucket that you could buy, a big round tin thing, pretty good size. And my father fixed a platform of wood, kind of that could fit right down in the bottom of that can. Then you'd fill it up with water a little ways. And the children then could bring jars of things from home in their lunch buckets. Cocoa, soups, some brought macaroni and cheese, And then we'd set those jars on the wood frame and get the water up so high. And then about the first recess there in the where I had gas, you'd turn a low flame under it, and by noon the kids had had something hot for dinner. So we qualified for a hot lunch. And when I went over east of Blackwell, where I had just the coal stove, then the container had to be set up on top of the stove about the first recess and stay until noon. And now, when you didn't have a fire, with the coal stove, then you didn't have any hot lunch, because I had no way of, like a hot plate or anything, to keep things hot.
Now, your father assisted you another time, too, at Christmas time. Tell us about that.
Yes. The first time he did that for me was when I was my first school at Narden, Christmas time. And we wanted to have a Christmas tree. And no electricity. We did have gas lights. And then on the side of the wall, there were coal oil lamps with reflectors behind them. Now, that's all the light we had. Well, anyway, my father said, I could fix you some lights for your Christmas tree. And being an electrician, he got a big one of those square batteries that they used to put in cars, And he brought me he would put a battery, then you hook one end of your string of lights there, and your other you have lights.
And you had a lighted Christmas tree at
And
the
the
school.
children, see, they didn't have a lighted tree at home because no one had electricity. And they were thrilled to death, and especially on a cloudy day. They loved to sit there or, and have that lighted Christmas tree. It was a real joy for them.
What a wonderful story. Looking back over all the years that you've taught, I'm sure you have some advice for young women, but women, males or females, who are going into the teaching profession nowadays. Do you have some words of wisdom for?
First of all, you have to have a lot of patience. You have to love children. You have to have the desire to, well, I was always looking for the little fella that, I don't want to call him not underprivileged. I mean, the little retiring one that needs to be brought out. Don't overlook those little people, because in some of them are jewels, diamonds in the rough. If you'll just give them a little bit of encouragement, they'll respond to you. And you just have to love it. I think you have to love it to be a good teacher.
You talked about some of the changes that you've seen in your career from the teaching techniques, and you were telling me about when the new math, as they used to call it,
yes,
came into practice in schools. Tell us a little bit about that.
I never liked the term new math because it really was not new. There was nothing new about it. It was a different approach to the old way. I think the thing that I remember most was that I learned something myself. As I told you, long division for the 4th grade. I never realized when I worked long division, it was just go into, take away, and go into and take away. Never realizing there was a place for that answer to be written, to be correctly. I just randomly, I never had been taught that until I went to a workshop for the new math, and they began putting the things in a chronological order. Beautiful. All right. You try, when you're teaching, you can teach the plus sign. Now this is my own invention. Plus, yeah, they can get that. Minus, yeah, they can take away. Divide, they get that concept. You try to give that a sign. Times. Now how does that mean times? What does times mean? When your times table, we used to call them your multiplication tables. Mm-hmm. So on my own, I was really in despair about that. I finally came up with the idea that X meant groups of. Mm-hmm. All right, 2 groups of 5, 5 groups of 2 makes all the difference in the world. But they finally got the concept. I worked that out by myself, but it was a challenge from the new approach to math to give a meaning to everything to the child when he's working out a problem.
A true teacher, I think, learning as you're teaching
That's
at the
right.
same time.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think that it was a very lucky day for Kay County that you decided to come home to Tonkawa rather than start a career in one of the big cities.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending some time with us today and telling us about your remembrances and your career in teaching. We've been talking today with Eleanor Hays, a longtime teacher and Tonkawa resident. Thank you so much for joining us on She Sees No Boundaries. Join us again next time.